Dust drifts across a flat expanse of temporary runways carved into the English countryside. Mechanics lean over open engine cowlings, hands blackened, jackets stiff from cold air that never fully lifts. Eisenhower stands near a map board supported by wooden sawhorses, fingers tracing the thin blue lines of channel. Patton approaches, boots cutting through the scattered gravel. Supplies arrive by morning, Patton says. Enough to move 2 armored divisions. Eisenhower studies the map, silent. Aircraft rumble overhead, low and insistent. A squadron of P-47s passes toward the coast, engines rising and falling like distant waves. "We push here," Eisenhower answers, tapping a sector marked with red arrows. "If we break through, they fold across the front." Patton looks toward the sky. If weather holds. Wind ripples loose papers on the board. Eisenhower grips them. Whether or not, the line moves. A jeep skids to a stop beside them. Dust kicks upward. A young officer jumps out, salutes, and hands over a folder. Eisenhower opens it. Photographs spill out. Burning fields, shattered rail lines, convoys smash along narrow roads. The east. Patton asks. "No," Eisenhower says. Pacific reports. B-25s hitting the northern approaches. Patton picks up one of the photos. Smoke billows from a shoreline depot. Silhouettes of twin-engine bombers pass above the clouds. "They're pushing hard," Patton says. "They have to," Eisenhower answers. Japan still reaching. Patton sets the photo down. "Looks like those crews have found their rhythm." Eisenhower closes the folder and hands it back. The jeep pulls away, leaving them in the wind and engine noise. "Let's get ready to move," Eisenhower says. Patton nods and walks toward a tent line where officers gather around tables scattered with handwritten orders. The camp buzzes with movement. Soldiers carrying crates, radio operators adjusting aerials, medics preparing cots. The air is thick with the sense in advance that can't wait any longer. Far across the world, the Pacific horizon glows. A long line of B-25 Mitchell sits on a runway cut into coral and crushed volcanic stone. Ground crews secure ammunition belts, each round clicking into place with metallic certainty. 8.50 caliber guns along the noses, and side packs gleam in the early light. Captain Harlow walks beneath the wing of his aircraft, palm grazing the riveted metal. The tail number is smudged with soot from weeks of operations. His co-pilot, Ramirez, approaches with a clipboard. Fuel topped. Full load, Ramirez says. Harlow checks the barrels jutting from the nose. All 8. All 8. Feed lines cleaned. Harlow nods. Behind them, other crews climb ladders, slide into turrets, tighten straps, run fingers along trigger solenoids. A low whistle moves through the lineup as engines begin turning. Propellers catch with sharp pulses that shake the air. Down the flight line, Colonel Briscoe moves past each crew. He stops briefly at Harlow's plane. Intel says the convoy leaves the staging point soon, Briscoe says. Small escorts. Light weather. Ramirez glances toward the open sea. Thin clouds drift across a pale morning. Enough visibility? More than enough, Briscoe says. He looks at Harlow. Make it count. Harlow climbs into the cockpit. The seat creaks. Gauges dance as the generator hums to life. He straps in, adjusts the throttles, and watches ground crew pull the chocks. His headset crackles. Tower to strike group. Taxi when ready. Harlow pushes the throttles forward. The aircraft rolls, slow at first, then steady. Dust and debris swirl around the nose as the Mitchell aligns with the runway. Ramirez, Harlow says, ready. Guns. Ready. The radio crackles again. Strike group, takeoff sequence 1 through 6. One after another. The B-25 surge forward, lifting from the rough runway and climbing into the brightening sky. Formation sets in quickly. 6 pairs, wings leveling, engines synchronized into a low, pulsing roar. Below them, island vegetation stretches across ridges and valleys. Thin roads snake between coconut groves and makeshift barracks. The shoreline curves into a thin blue line that vanishes into open water. Ramirez checks the chart folded over his knee. Convoy expected near the strait. Harlow glances through the windshield. The ocean spreads wide and empty. Any signals from scouts? Ramirez asks. Not yet. Back over Europe, Eisenhower's tent glows with lamplight. Officers stand around the table. Patton points at a coastal town outlined in blue pencil. We move artillery into the sector by nightfall. Patton says. Infantry supports the northern edge. Eisenhower nods. Armor breaks through after dawn. A messenger enters with a radio sheet. Eisenhower reads it aloud. B-25 groups advancing on target zones in the Pacific. Patton smirks. Those boys don't rest. We're all on the same clock, Eisenhower replies. Rain begins tapping against the canvas. The lamplight flickers. Officers exchange glances, waiting for direction. Prepare the columns, Eisenhower says. Nothing changes. Meanwhile, over the Pacific, clouds begin to gather in scattered clusters. The formation weaves around rising towers of vapor. Sunlight flashes across the fuselages. Harlow scans the surface below. Ramirez, port side. Ramirez leans forward. I see it. Small silhouettes appear along the water. Thin wakes tracing behind them. That's our convoy, Harlow says. Radio chatter fills the headsets. Strike group, approach from altitude. Nose guns live on run. Ramirez checks the switches. Armed. Harlow tightens his grip on the yoke. Let's set the tone. The formation banks gently. Shadows sweeping across the waves. The convoy comes into full view. Cargo ships arranged in staggered line. Escort vessels flanking their sides. Anti-aircraft guns begin firing. Dark bursts rise toward the bombers. Harlow steadies the aircraft. Hold course. The nose dips slightly as they enter the attack run. Engines scream. Bullets rake the ocean surface. Range closing. Ramirez says, Guns hot. Harlow answers. The B-25 dives lower. The convoy grows in the windshield, sharp and clear. Waves strike against hull plates. Crewmen scatter across decks. Then the first Mitchell opens fire. 8 guns erupt from his nose with a pulsing, unbroken stream. Tracers streak across the water, cutting paths that glow against the sea spray. The vessel below shudders under impact. Ramirez braces against the force of their own firing run. On target. Harlow holds the plane level. The guns rip forward, carving through the escort vessel's bridge. Glass shatters. Smoke billows upward. The vessel yaws sharply. Harlow pulls up, engine straining. The formation continues its run, each bomber unleashing concentrated streams of fire. Below, the convoy turns into chaos. Ships steering violently. Crews scrambling, water churning beneath exploding rounds. Harlow circles back, eyes fixed on the damage. Looks like they felt that. Ramirez says. Harlow watches smoke rising from the convoy. More vessels turn wildly, attempting to break formation. We're not done, Harlow says. We make sure they remember this. The Pacific winds push at the wings as the Mitchells regroup. The sun climbs higher. Empty shells clatter along the floor of each aircraft. Across the world, Eisenhower folds a final set of plans. Patton adjusts his gloves, ready for movement. 2 different fronts. One relentless push. Both beginning to turn. Fog settles across the English encampment before sunrise. Lanterns glow faintly between rows of parked trucks and stacked ammunition crates. Patton steps out his tent, tightening the strap of his helmet. The ground squelches beneath his boots as he walks toward the operations tent, where Eisenhower stands beside a long table lined with fresh reports. Everything moving? Patton asks. Columns formed, Eisenhower replies. Engineers say the roads are stable enough. Patton scans the map. Stable enough isn't stable. We don't have another choice, Eisenhower says. Outside, the first engines start. Columns of half-tracks line up, headlights pointing toward distant hills still swallowed in dark. A cold wind sweeps across the camp, flipping canvas flaps and scattering loose papers. A radio operator steps forward with a clipboard. Message from naval observers. Enemy reinforcements detected on the western routes. Patton snorts. They'll be too late. Eisenhower takes the sheet. They're trying to plug the gap before we widen it. Patton rests his hands on the table. Then we hit it before they plug anything. Eisenhower folds the report. We'll know soon. In the Pacific, the B-25 formation circles above the scattered convoy. Thin columns of smoke blend with the morning haze. The ocean reflects bursts of fire from escort guns struggling to find the bomber's altitude. Harlow steadies the plane as he banks into position. Ramirez wipes sweat from his brow, eyes fixed on the ships below. Rear gunner calling in. Ramirez says, "More fire from starboard escorts." Harlow glances at the mirror mounted above the panel. Black bursts creep higher. They're adjusting. Radio chatterizes. Strike group, second run. Concentrate on center line cargo. Break escorts. The Mitchells tighten formation. Engines thrum in a synchronized pulse. Sunlight flashes off metal surfaces scarred from previous missions. Ramirez checks ammunition. Half drums left. "Enough," Harlow says. The formation descends. Tracers rise from the ships, streaking toward them. The ocean whips upward with each near hit. Harlow keeps the nose steady. Start run. The 8 guns roar again, forming a continuous stream of fire slicing through the air. Deck planks splinter. Cargo tarps erupt. Smoke pours from an engine room struck during the first pass. Ramirez grips the side console. Convoy breaking formation. "Good," Harlow says. "Scatter them." The plane pulls up sharply as an escort vessel fires a desperate burst. Shells explode uncomfortably close, rattling the fuselage. The wings shudder. Warning lights blink before stabilizing. Harlow levels out. "They're learning our angle." "Then change the angle," Ramirez says. Harlow banks left, cutting across the formation's usual pattern. The other Mitchell crews adjust quickly, repositioning behind him. The bombers arc wide, then drop to a new approach vector that hugs the surface of sea. "Keep it low," Harlow says. "Ride the foam." Spray washes across the glass as they skim the waves. Guns on the ships lower, struggling to track targets flying just above their sight lines. "Now," Harlow says. The nose guns open fire again, tearing across the length of the freighter. Sparks erupt along its hull. Smoke pours from the lower deck as crew members sprint toward the stern. Behind them, the second bomber peppers another vessel, rounds punching holes along the superstructure. The escort in the rear turns too sharply, sliding sideways as the rudder fails. Over Europe, Eisenhower's camp shifts into full motion. Troops pour into trucks. Radio poles shake with constant transmission. The sound of rolling engines grows heavier by the minute. Patton mounts a jeep. Open the north gate. Move the armor first. Soldiers swing, open the wooden barriers. The jeep rolls forward, leading a column of Sherman tanks. Their tracks bite into soft earth as they advance toward the main road. Patton grips the rail of the jeep. "Tell the artillery to maintain spacing. No bunching." A sergeant jogs beside the jeep. Road scouts report minor flooding along the southern route. "We're not using the southern route," Patton says. "Tell them to keep eyes forward." Rain begins to fall again, thin at first, then steady enough to darken uniforms and equipment. The sky lowers with heavy gray clouds. Eisenhower steps out of the tent, watching the long line of vehicles stretch into the distance. "How long until first contact?" an officer asks. Eisenhower adjusts his cap. "A few hours if everything holds. And if it doesn't, then we adjust," Eisenhower says. Across the Pacific, the storm thickens. Clouds roll across the horizon, dark and uneven. Wind pushes against the B-25s, forcing the formation to widen. Harlow studies the shifting patterns of the sea below. Ramirez listens to the crackling radio. Message from the rear elements. Weather worsening. Visibility dropping after 15 minutes. Harlow exhales. "We finished before that." Lightning flashes far off, illuminating the tops of the waves. Convoys still scattered, Ramirez says. Escorts regrouping. Then we split them again. Harlow turns toward the radio. "Strike group reformed by pairs. We'll hit from multiple points." Keep runs short and sharp. One by one, pairs of Mitchells break off, looping into separate attack paths. The scattered formation gives the convoy no predictable angle. Guns on the ships turn frantically, unable to track all of them. Harlow drops the nose again. The 8 guns unleash another burst. Metal tears from the upper deck of a cargo ship, already trailing smoke from earlier hits. Flames rise along its bow. Forward gunner calling. Ramirez says, secondary explosions on target. Harlow pulls up. Good. Move to the escort. The wind buffets the aircraft. The storm pushes closer. Spray hits the fuselage in sudden sheets. We're losing the clean route back. Ramirez says, then we don't go back yet. Another pass. Another shudder the wings. More empty shell casings bounce across the floor. Back in Europe, the muddy roads shake with the weight of armored columns. Villages flash past. Stone houses, shuttered windows, empty fields waiting for the next wave of movement. Infantry march alongside half-tracks, rifles slung, helmets tilted against the rain. Patton stands in the jeep, shouting orders to passing officers. Keep spacing tight on the right flank. Don't let the line drift. An officer nods and runs down the column, relaying instructions. Eisenhower's staff truck pulls alongside. Eisenhower leans out of the window. Reports say enemy armor is repositioning. They'll be repositioning all day, Patton says. We keep pushing. Behind them, the horizon thunders with the sound of artillery moving into place. In the Pacific, the convoy burns in multiple points. Smoke merges with the storm clouds overhead. The Mitchells regroup above the chaos. Ramirez scans the sky. Weather closing in. Lightning on both sides. Harlow checks the gauges. Fuel levels dip. Ammunition nearly gone. Last run, he says. Make it clean. The formation tightens again. Engines roar. The bombers drop through the wind like blades. Below them, the convoy struggles to maintain shape. One escort lifts to the side, water rushing across its tilted deck. Another fires blindly into the approaching storm. Harlow lines up the final pass. The 8 guns fire in one last sweeping burst. Rounds strike the escort's communications tower, ripping it apart. Target hit. Ramirez says, break off, Harlow orders. The Mitchells pull away, climbing into the thickening storm. The wind screams against the fuselage. Waves smash below. Lightning flashes bright enough to silhouette the damaged ships. Ramirez steadies himself as the aircraft jolts upward. We showed them. Harlow focuses on the storm ahead. They'll think twice before running this route again. Thunder rolls across the Pacific as the formation disappears into the wall of rain. Gray clouds roll over the English countryside as the armored columns push deeper into contested terrain. Mud sprays behind the tank tracks, coating the sides of half-tracks and transport trucks. Patton's jeep bounces along the uneven road while he stands gripping the frame, eyes fixed ahead. A distant explosion thunders across the valley. Soldiers look toward the sound. A radio in the back of the jeep crackles with rushed voices. Enemy armor sighted on the eastern ridge. Numbers unknown. Patton leans toward the handset. Hold the ridge. Artillery is coming. Another transmission breaks through. Infantry pinned near the crossroads. Heavy machine gun fire from reinforced positions. Patton signals the driver to accelerate. Push forward. Clear that line. The jeep surges ahead. Eisenhower arrives moments later in a staff car, stepping out onto muddy ground. Officers gather around him. Maps press against the hood, rain dropping onto the paper. Enemy pressure increasing on both flanks. An officer says. Eisenhower studies the ridges. Smoke rises in thin columns from scattered points along the landscape. Keep the columns moving. We don't stop. Far across the Pacific, the B-25 formation struggles through the storm. Sheets of rain slam against the fuselages. Lightning flashes across the sky, illuminating the formation in brief bursts. Harlow grips the controls as turbulence shakes the aircraft. Hold altitude, he says. Ramirez checks the wavering gauges. We're drifting north. Correct it. The plane dips slightly as Harlow forces it back into formation. The storm tightens around them, wind pushing sideways with sudden bursts. The radio crackles. Strike group, keep heading. Island base still 40 minutes. Ramirez wipes water leaking from a seam above the windshield. We're running low. We'll make it, Harlow says. Another jolt slams the aircraft. Loose casings clatter across the floor. The rear gunner calls in through the intercom. Tail stabilizer shaking. Feels loose. Keep eyes on it, Harlow responds. Lightning splits the sky again, followed by a rolling boom that shudders through the wings. Back in Europe, Patton reaches the crossroads under fire. Bullets strike the ground around the Jeep. Soldiers take cover behind broken stone walls and overturned carts. Patton steps out, shouting over the gunfire. Move the machine guns to the left. Pin their flank. Infantry rush into position. The air fills with overlapping bursts. Enemy fire cracks from the distant line of hedges. Eisenhower arrives moments later with additional units. He walks the edge of the position, taking in the layout of both sides. Artillery rumbles from the rear, getting closer. Bring the batteries forward. He orders. A young lieutenant approaches. Sir, their armor is moving down from the ridge. Patton hears it. He turns. The faint rumble grows into a louder tremor. Dark shapes emerge through the smoke. Patton points. Sherman's forward. Form on that incline. Tanks shift into position. Engines roaring as they climb the muddy rise. Enemy shells strike the ground in tall bursts of dirt. Patton calls to Eisenhower. We hold this ground, or they break our line. Eisenhower nods once. We hold it. Thunder rolls again, not from the sky, but from the guns. Across the world, the Pacific storm reaches its peak. Harlow's plane struggles to maintain altitude. Rain streaks across the glass like small knives. The engines groan under the strain. Visibility dropping to nothing. Ramirez says, "Stay on instruments." The radio breaks through in fragments. Strong crosswinds. Adjust heading. Watch your distance. Static swallows the rest. Suddenly, a violent downdraft rips through the formation. Harlow's plane drops sharply. Alarms blare. Ramirez grabs a console. Pull it up. Harlow forces the yoke back. The aircraft levels after several tense seconds, wings shaking. Behind them, another B-25 loses altitude too quickly, vanishing into a thick sheet of rain. A strained voice bursts over the radio. Mayday! Losing control. The transmission cuts out. Ramirez stares ahead. We're losing the chain. Harlow keeps his eyes on the wavering compass. Stay locked. Don't break. Lightning flashes to their left, illuminating two Mitchells flying dangerously close to each other. They separate just before another downdraft hits. Ramirez listens to the intercom, tail section still shaking. The storm rages on. In Europe, the enemy armor pushes closer. Eisenhower stands behind a tank as shells explode along the ridge, throwing smoke and dirt into the air. Machine gun fire mixes with a steady thud of artillery. Patton climbs onto a Sherman's side, pounding the turret. Advance! Keep your spacing. The tank grinds forward. Others follow, forming a staggered line. Enemy shells strike, sending debris across the field. One Sherman takes a hit on the track and grinds to a halt. Crew members climb out, ducking behind a disabled vehicle. Patton signals to infantry. Cover them. Rifles and machine guns open up, forcing the enemy to delay their push. Eisenhower surveys the flank. Artillery reports ready. He raises a radio. Fire on the ridge. Full pattern. Moments later, the hills erupt in a sequence of heavy blasts. Earth flies into the air. Enemy armor jolts under the impact, their formation scattering. Patton looks back at Eisenhower. That's our opening. Take it. Eisenhower replies. The American tanks surge forward, pushing past crossroads. Enemy fire weakens. Their line begins to break. In the Pacific, the storm thins just enough to reveal faint outlines of islands in the distance. Ramirez spots them first. Landfall ahead. Harlow pushes the throttle. We're almost there. But the intercom suddenly bursts with urgent warnings. Tail spar about to fail. getting vibration. A loud crack echoes through the aircraft. The tail jolts downward. The plane wobbles violently. Ramirez grips the sides of the seat. We're losing structural integrity. Harlow pulls back carefully, trying to counter the imbalance. Metal groans. Rivets squeal. Hold together. Harlow mutters. Radio voices appear again. Strike group, report status. Storm weakening near the coast. Ramirez presses the transmit button. Aircraft 7 damaged. Tail section compromised. Request immediate priority landing. The answer returns after a long static break. Clearing runway now. Bring her in. Lightning flashes one final time behind them, fading as the clouds begin to part. In Europe, Eisenhower and Patton stand on the rise, overlooking the now secure crossroads. Smoke settles over the landscape. Tanks reposition. Infantry reform along the hedges. Patton wipes mud from his gloves. They broke faster than expected. Not fast enough, Eisenhower says. He stares toward the distant ridge where smoke still rises. They'll counter again. Patton steps up beside him. We'll be ready. A runner approaches with a radio update. Sir, Pacific reports incoming aircraft returning from strike. Eisenhower nods. Good. They'll need the runway clear. Patton glances at him. Sounds like they had a rough one. They always do. Eisenhower says. Back in the Pacific, the coastline draws closer. The storm fades behind the Mitchells, leaving streaks of black smoke trailing from damaged aircraft. Harlow steadies the plane. Ramirez call final approach. Ramirez radios ahead. Aircraft 7 turning in. Emergency landing. The runway crew scrambles into position. Signalmen raise flares. Trucks pull off the strip. Harlow aligns the nose. The tail section shakes violently. Easy, Ramirez says. Just keep her straight. Harlow lowers the gear. The aircraft descends sharply, fighting crosswinds left over from the storm. Wheels hit the runway hard. The plane bounces once, then drops again, skidding along the surface. Sparks flash beneath the tail. Harlow brakes steadily. The plane slows. Finally, it stops. Ground crew runs toward them. Engines wind down. Smoke rises from the tail. Ramirez exhales. We brought her back. Harlow looks toward the distant sea, where the storm still churns. This isn't finished. Night settles over the European front as the last traces of daylight fade behind the hills. Fires burn in distant pockets across the valley. The American advance halts briefly while units regroup. Engines idle. Radios buzz with fracture reports. Patton stands near a command half-track, helmet tilted forward, hands resting on his belt. Eisenhower approaches, a dim lantern casting their shadows across the mud. Scouts picked up movement east of the ridge. Eisenhower says, more than expected. Patton nods. They're trying to retake the crossroads, or delay us until their next wave arrives. Patton looks toward the dark ridge where flashes of enemy signal lamps blink faintly. We hit them before they form. Eisenhower studies the darkness. Artillery? Already in position. Then we're not waiting. The two men walk toward the forward line as officers gather around them. Maps are lit by red torches. Soldiers cluster behind broken stone walls, readying their weapons for another push. Far across the Pacific, the storm has passed. The air above the island base is clear again. The damaged B-25 sits under floodlights while mechanics swarm around it, tools clanging against metal. Harlow stands beside the wing, watching sparks fly as the crew works to reinforce the bent-tail spar. Ramirez returns from the operations tent carrying a new briefing packet. New convoy spotted. Same route. Harlow wipes grease from his hand. Already? Intel says they moved assets after hearing about the earlier strike. Harlow looks toward the runway where the remaining Mitchells are being refueled. They're pushing supplies hard. A voice calls from behind. Colonel Briscoe approaches, boots crunching across gravel. We launch before dawn. Weather clears for a 4-hour window. Ramirez flips through the briefing. Target heavier than before. Briscoe nods. Escorts doubled. He looks at Harlow's damaged aircraft. Will she hold? Harlow studies the patch tail. She'll hold long enough. Briscoe doesn't question it. Be ready. Back in Europe, the first enemy flares shoot into the air, casting sharp light over the ridge. Infantry tense as shadows twist across the field. Patton climbs onto a low wall, raising his arm. Artillery, fire. A second later, the ridge explodes in a rolling curtain of blasts. The ground shakes. Trees snap. The enemy fires back, streaks of tracer rounds cutting through the darkness. Eisenhower moves through the line, giving quick directives. Shift the right flank. Keep pressure on their center. Rain begins to fall, thin at first, then heavier. Soldiers wipe their faces and reload. Tanks roar to life again, their silhouettes lit by muzzle flashes. Enemy armor emerges through the smoke. Engines rumble. Headlights blink through drifting fog. Patton signals the Shermans. Advance! The tanks surge forward, tearing through the mud. Enemy shells streak past them, exploding in bright bursts. One Sherman takes a hit, flames rising from its engine deck. The crew escapes, sprinting into cover. Eisenhower watches the lines close in. This is their push. Then we break it, Patton says. In the Pacific, pre-dawn light creeps across the horizon. The Mitchell crews gather beside their aircraft, strapping gear, checking ammunition belts, scanning every surface with quiet precision. Floodlights flicker off as the sky brightens. Briscoe addresses them briefly. Same route, heavier guards. Fast in, fast out. Harlow climbs a ladder and settles into the cockpit. Mechanics pull the final brace from the tail. The aircraft shifts slightly, but holds. Ramirez takes a seat. If the tail doesn't like the wind, we'll feel it early. Harlow adjusts the throttles. Then we keep the wings level and hope she stays honest. Engines ignite one by one across the field, their rising rumble merging into a unified wall sound. Signal crews wave the formation into position. Strike group, the radio calls. Cleared for takeoff. The B-25s accelerate down the runway, lifting into the dawn. Clouds drift far above them, stretched in by the wind. The ocean glows faintly in the rising sun. Harlow guides a plane into formation. The patch tail rattles once, then stabilizes. Looks good, Ramirez says. For now, Harlow answers. Hours later, the convoy enters view, larger, tighter, faster. Cigarette-shaped cargo ships cut through the waves with high wakes. Escorts form an outward arc. More guns, Ramirez says. More targets, Harlow replies. The radio flares with orders. Strike group, maintain altitude. Wait for signal. Meanwhile, in Europe, the ridge battle reaches full intensity. Patton and Eisenhower watch as enemy forces push down the slope with renewed strength. Artillery blasts tear open the ground. Machine gun fire draws streaks across the darkness. Patton raises binoculars. They reinforce from the east. We expected that, Eisenhower says. Keep the armor moving. American tanks grind forward under heavy fire. Infantry follow closely, firing at shapes moving between trees. Explosions turn the hillside into a rolling wave of dirt and metal. Suddenly, a radio operator shouts, "Enemy breakthrough on the right." Eisenhower reacts instantly. Send the reserve battalion. Tell them to hold that ridge. Patton jumps off the stone wall. I'm taking the left flank. If they press there too, we're boxed. Eisenhower nods. Go. Patton disappears into the smoke with a cluster of officers. Back over Pacific, the Mitchells receive the go signal. Strike group, engage. Altitude drops rapidly as the formation descends toward the convoy. Anti-aircraft fire erupts from the escorts, creating overlapping bursts. Busy skies, Ramirez says. Harlow steadies a nose. Line up. The 8 guns burst to life as they close in. Tracers slash across the water, hitting the lead escort. Debris flies into the air. The ship leans hard as its helm jerks violently. Another Mitchell strays the center cargo ship, tearing through crates and upper decks. Escort guns return fire. A, B. 25 takes a hit on the left wing, trailing smoke but staying in the fight. Ramirez shouts over the engine roar. Target ship pulling south. Follow it, Harlow says. They bank sharply, pushing toward the isolating vessel. The patch tail trembles. A metallic groan echoes behind them. Tail's not happy, Ramirez warns. Neither am I, Harlow says. Guns hot. The nose guns fire again, raking the escort's deck. A direct hit collapses the forward gun mount. Crewmen scatter across the tilting platform. Back in Europe, Patton reaches a left flank as enemy infantry charge through the smoke. American soldiers fire from makeshift positions behind broken vehicles. Mortar blasts send shrapnel into the air. Patton shouts to an officer, "Push them back." Tanks reposition and fire into the advancing enemy. The ridge lights up as rounds slam into the hillside. Eisenhower stands at the crossroads, radio in hand. Left flank holding, right flank stabilizing. A runner delivers a new update. Enemy loss is heavy, sir. They're starting to pull back. Eisenhower looks toward the ridge. Press forward. Don't give them the chance to regroup. In the Pacific, the convoy breaks apart under the relentless strafing. Smoke trails across the surface of the sea. Fire reflects off shifting waves. But then an explosion erupts behind the Mitchells. One of the bombers takes a direct hit from an anti-aircraft burst. Flames trail from the fuselage. B-25 going down. Ramirez yells. Harlow glances back, but stays on target. We finish the run. They dive once more, unleashing a final sweep of fire across the crippled escort. The ship lurches sideways. Pull up, Ramirez says. Harlow pulls back hard. The patch tail groans. A loud crack echoes through the aircraft. The nose wobbles. Tail spar losing it. Ramirez shouts. Harlow levels the wings with both hands locked on the yoke. The plane steadies barely. Hold together, Harlow mutters. Behind them, the convoy burns. Across the world, the European ridge falls silent as enemy forces retreat under the pressure of armored and infantry attacks. American units push forward, securing the line. Soldiers lift their helmets and look toward the smoke-filled hills. Eisenhower exhales once. Patton climbs back from the left flank, covered in mud, gesturing toward the valley. They broke, Patton says. For now, Eisenhower replies. Patton smirks. Long enough. In the Pacific, Harlow turns the damaged plane toward the distant island. The ocean stretches endlessly ahead. The sky begins to clear. Ramirez watches a shaking tail. One more landing. Harlow nods. And then we rest. The morning haze settles over the forward airstrip. Faint light spreads across the uneven ground, revealing tire marks, dried mud, and scattered fragments left from the night before. A thin wind moves across the lineup of B-25s, lifting narrow trails of dust that disappear into the cold air. Men walk in silence. Each step leaves shallow grooves in the hardened soil. The smell of hot oil clings to the fuselages, as if the aircraft still carried inside them the lingering hum of their guns. Dobbs crosses the maintenance area with his flight helmet under his arm. Mechanics work around him, tightening panels, tapping wrenches against metal, checking fuel lines. No one mentions the raids of the previous night. Their eyes drift toward the aircraft, then back to their tasks. Connor walks up behind him. Heard you didn't sleep. Dobbs keeps his gaze on the nose of the nearest B-25. The sound hasn't left. It will when we're back up there. Dobbs answers with a brief nod. Across the strip, infantry units form columns for their next push. Trucks move past, throwing dust over the equipment crates. Soldiers glance toward the sky as if waiting for reassurance. Shields of hands raised against the rising sun. An officer approaches Dobbs with a folded slip of paper. Command wants your crew ready by noon. Mission? The officer hands him the note. Force reconnaissance. Last pocket 100 kilometers out. Dobbs tucks the paper away. Understood. He walks toward the aircraft's nose. The reinforced structure carries the story of its missions in every replaced rivet and patch panel. A long burn mark crawls along the side gun mount, still dark from the previous barrage. Dobbs runs a hand across the cold surface, as if listening to the machine breathe. Connor, Glazer, Miguel, and Hartman gather behind him. Their faces are drawn from the long hours, but their movements remain steady. Connor tightens his gloves. Let's finish it. Miguel adjusts his headset. One more run. Glazer looks at the broad propellers. Heard the enemy pulled back overnight. Hartman responds quietly. Pullbacks leave pieces behind. Dobbs studies each of them. We go in, see what's left, cut off whatever's moving. Stay tight. Connor nods. Straight and simple. Straight and simple, Dobbs repeats. They climb aboard. The interior feels darker than usual, the light reluctant to enter the narrow windows. Mechanical echoes travel through the frame as Glazer settles into the top turret, testing the rotation. Miguel adjusts radio cables, checking for loose connections. Hartman sorts ammunition canisters. Connor locks the rear hatch with a heavy thud. The propellers spin to life. The sound grows until it presses against the walls of the cockpit. The B-25 rolls forward, gaining speed, lifting away from the runway and piercing through a thin sheet of fog. Below them, the landscape stretches in wounded patterns. Burned fields, flattened tree lines, roads cut into irregular shapes by artillery. Smoke rises in long strands that fade into the morning light. Columns of Allied forces glint beyond the hills, moving to secure the new front. Connor studies the horizon. Feels different today. Dobbs steadies the controls. Show me. Static crackles through the radio. Miguel turns knob slowly. Heavy interference from the north. Dobbs. Direction of the objective. Keep trying. They fly low, brushing above the treetops. Turbulence jostles the aircraft, pressing seatbelts against their uniforms. Glazer sweeps the turret, scanning the ridge ahead. The valley appears. Vast, muted, covered in shifting shadows. No vehicles. No artillery. No patrols. Just a lonely thread of smoke drifting without direction. Dobbs reduces speed, looking for movement. Miguel presses the headset to his ear. Nothing. No signals. No chatter. Connor leans forward. Could be a trap. Hartman checks the side guns. Or it's empty. Dobbs keeps the aircraft steady. We verify either way. They descend further, wings slicing to the cold air. The valley floor reveals broken bunkers, abandoned crates, and scattered equipment left in disorganized trails. Glazer rotates the turret again. Not a soul. Miguel, still no radio traffic. Connor, they ran. Dobbs, or they were pushed. They pass over a collapsed bridge. Its metal frame twisted toward the river. Beyond it lies a retreating path of footprints and tire tracks fading into the forest line. Dobbs tightens his grip on the controls. Mark the route. Miguel scribbles coordinates. Logged. For a moment. The aircraft flies in near silence, nothing but the engines filling the valley. The B-25 glides over the remains of the enemy's last position. No ambush. No fire, just the residue of a force that has lost its direction. Connor looks at Dobbs. We show them what 8 guns can do. Dobbs keeps his eyes ahead. They know now. Glazer leans down from the turret. So what's left? Dobbs answers. Whatever comes after this. The aircraft ascends out of the valley. The sunlight catches the fuselage, reflecting off the patchwork metal like a shifting mosaic. The landscape widens beneath them, revealing the long path of the conflict stretching behind and the uncertain terrain ahead. Miguel listens to the radio again. New message coming through. Dobbs. Read it. Miguel adjusts the dial. Ground units advancing. Enemy retreat confirmed. Command requests confirmation from air. Connor. They want our eyes on it. Dobbs. Send it. Tell them the valley is clear. Miguel transmits the message. Done. The crew settles. The tension that clung to them since the night before begins to loosen, though no one says it aloud. The engines continue their steady rhythm as the aircraft heads back toward Allied lines. Below, the smoke thins. The land opens. Troops march in organized formations, following the routes to be. 25 crews carved open night after night. Connor watches the shifting terrain. Think they'll remember this part? Dobbs answers without turning. They'll remember what mattered. The plane flies on. No fanfare. No final burst of fire. Just the quiet passage of a machine and the men inside it, carrying the weight of what they did and what they spared. The horizon widens, and the airstrip appears again as a thin line across the earth. The B-25 begins its descent, steady, controlled, without hesitation. Dobbs guides it toward the runway. Hold tight. Connor. Home stretch. Glazer. Finally. Miguel. About time. Hartman. Ready. The wheels touch the ground with a sharp hiss. Dust rises around the fuselage as the aircraft rolls to a stop. The engines wind down. Silence returns. Dobbs opens a cockpit hatch. Cold air rushes in. The crew steps onto the runway. Boots pressing into the earth they defended from above. No speeches. No applause. Just men walking away from a machine that did exactly what it was built to do. Connor looks back at the B-25. Looks different now. Dobbs studies the scorch panels and patch metal. It earned that. They continue across the strip. The war moves forward. They move with it.